to start our panel discussion, and I have a super pleasure to invite on the stage Merle Maigre, who is the Executive Vice President for Government Relations at CybExer. And she has super strong background in cybersecurity, in NATO Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence in Tallinn. She has been the security policy advisor to Estonian presidents Kersti Kaljulaid and Toomas Hendrik Ilves, so on, served in NATO and so on. So super knowledgeable about everything when it comes to real policy and security. And then I have pleasure to invite on a stage Peeter P. Mõtsküla from TRINITI law firm. And Peter focuses on matters of IP and IT law. His professional past includes close to a quarter century of hands-on experience with IT industry companies including Proact, Skype, Microlink, Cybernetica, to name a few. And so we have a great lawyer for the topic as well. And so to start off with a general topic, what is your thinking? How much freedom can we delegate to machines overall? How much can we trust, and where does the limit go? Janer is keen to start off.
I kind of started with off as well. It's definitely, like, where to put it, it's different occasion. As we as well, we have different automation tools. If we divide them like face comparison, we analyze the video in the background, which needs different tools for that, and those different tools have different places that you put it. I think overall it's always more about the transparency a little bit to go with.
All right, Merle, what's your thinking?
Well, it's about humans being in the loop, on the loop, or out of the loop. The standard approach to artificial intelligence, and when regarding the defense side, the Western military establishment clearly maintains that it should be humans at least on the loop, so not to keep the humans out. But the question is deeper. It's about one is how much liberty to give to the machines, but also it's about how to regulate and then how much to regulate, and we can discuss that in more detail. But more generally, I would maintain that at the end of the day, the artificial brain will only be as clever and as ethical as the people programming it. And therefore, when the policymakers, the decision makers, try to regulate things, it's important to maintain they don't need to understand every little bit and part of AI. But they need to understand enough to assess the impact of artificial intelligence on our society, on the functioning of the democracy and on the functioning of our state, as well as on national security and international security. And all of that starts with asking the right questions, so we can dig deeper into that. What are the necessary parts of structuring these oversight measures?
What are a couple of questions that we should really ask when defining those borders? Well,
AI clearly becomes more and more embedded in decision-making, so it's important to have certain safeguards and principles in place. And some of them, for example, well, I would outline three, for example. One is transparency on where algorithms processing on AI-shaped decision-making, how much they influence the decision-making. The second is what was discussed here on the stage earlier already, is the access to data. Access to data can help public authorities and watchdog to exercise oversights, because sometimes it is the third-party testing that really reveals some of the crucial measures that are important for the oversight. And then, well, it's at the same time important to maintain transparency over it all, so that decision-making and understanding it is clear to the sides who are making the decision.
All right, thanks. And Peter, what's your thinking?
Well, first of all, the important question is whether we speak of narrow or general AI. As of today, the best we humans have is narrow AI, and in such scenarios, it's quite easy to keep humans in or on the loop. As soon as we shift into the domain of general AI, I would maintain that keeping people on the loop is the best that we would be able to achieve. Keeping them in the loop would become obsolete. So the question of how much we should give is ultimately related to the time frame. Today, definitely we should give more and keep more control to humans and just give specific areas of decision making to the AIs. But even there, for temporarily, it might make more sense to give a certain decision making entirely to an AI with the possibility of overriding it. The Boeing 737 MAX is a good example. Without these automatic piloting systems, modern aircraft just won't fly, and if these autopilot systems fail, then these planes also do not fly because humans intercept and ground these planes.
So this is a hardcore example where we can go if the machine takes too much of control. Let's get back to the Chinese example. If the machine could take some control over there, where do we think the border in that case goes of credit scoring every activity, every step where you go, and then giving you the permit of which kindergarten your children could go, or which school, or which nightclub you get to enter, or restaurant at all. So where do you think the border goes in that sort of governmental case, policing, and what's the future of that?
To put it a bit provocatively, what's the big difference between the Chinese identification system and Veriff's identification system? It's always a matter of how we use a tool, not what the tool is.
Veriff, can your tool be used for such things?
I think the most important thing, in the sense, definitely agree, if we look at it in a broader spectrum, what's the difference between China and Veriff? But I think the small things are the ones that count, in the sense, for example, opt-in, opt-out. As a person, you should have the possibility to actually be forgotten and to actually understand, and the re-decisioning as well. So if we look on the bigger picture, yes, but going into the details, there's a difference.
Well, I would throw in, and asking provocative questions, I would ask a variation of it. Ultimately, if we think of China, where the state has the total control of the people, using AI, using technology to give out goodies and decide about lives, is one end. And at the other end, we could say, is Estonia, where there is a lot of the public-private, or the state, I mean, people trust, but a lot of the interaction goes online. So let's ask, what differentiates Estonia, or in a dystopia, like what keeps Estonia turning to China? And I would answer that ultimately, I mean, the technology, very broadly speaking, it is in Estonia also the state provided, a lot of the state provided services and the infrastructure. But it boils down to the health of democracy. it boils down to the fact that, well, people trust the state, but also that there are measures, there is the rule of law, there are the democratic measures reined in that avoid the state to maliciously use its power against the people. And when I gave it a thought the other day, and what I think in Estonia especially is that it's not just that the people are dependent on the state in their everyday online interactions and should be afraid of the state manipulating them. In Estonia we've reached a situation where the state is dependent on the citizens or on the people. I mean, it is the functioning of the state that is dependent on the people's trust and the people using it. Going back on pen and paper, for example, in Estonia is not really a viable solution, and in some measures it's not even possible because we do not have the analog alternatives. So it is this mutual positive dependency that hopefully that is a guarantee in Estonia and an example that you can have a state online, and yet it's for the common good, and it's positive.
What could businesses learn from that? We have managed to create such a good trust to our citizens. What should be applied in businesses to create similar level of trust?
Are you asking about other countries using the Estonian public-private partnership example, or?
Just what could businesses learn from Estonian case? There's such a high level of trust to government. We know that our data, we can see who has access to our data and so on. What are the other practical tips for businesses to take into account when building systems? For instance, Facebook, not much of a trust left over there. Google is now also in their last week's conference, they highlighted that we will give users more control over their data, giving more control, the privacy Windows privacy search. But then on the other hand, they are starting to sell ads on your Google Maps searches, so they will monetizing the free services like more consciously, and then the other, while with another hand, they give you tools to give you a better feeling around your
Well, ultimately,
privacy.
we can't really compare big businesses to a country. It is in a state, the people regularly vote, and if the politicians and decision makers are responsible and should respond to people's concerns, and if people don't like them, they vote for new people next time. Unlike in a big platform providers like Google, Amazon, Twitter, Facebook, where you do not really have that control, you can choose not to be their user. An additional thing to the previous sort of Estonian example of like what are some of the measures put in, I think it's very important that people own their own data. That's what is different from China. In Estonia, people own their own data, so I, as a user, get to decide who has access to my medical files. So this is an important principle, which is also grained in the legislation, along with the overall digital signing law, whatever, it's ID law, or what law is it? In Estonia, that links my... creates the authentication and again is a guarantee that I am in control of the data linked to me. Tips to big businesses, I think, and regulation. I think there's this, you have to take responsibility when you have. That's what has happened in Estonia. But again, I think the logic of leading a nation, leading a state, and the logic of leading a big company are different. And there are certain amounts of regulation. That's what EU has done, GDPR. There is also the Network Information Security Directive, which puts in, which regulates the critical information infrastructure providers. But so that's ways for not a nation but EU, for example, to channel big businesses into some compliance with rules and laws. There's also sort of leading by example, or I'm thinking of the Microsoft initiated Paris Call, for example, where big businesses, they want to be seen as trustworthy, responsible actors, be it because they're really good from the inside or just that because their consumers demand that, and that can be a powerful drive.
Mm-hmm. I think what's something similar to governments or like big businesses is kind of the Estonia example yet again is that you earn trust and it takes time sometimes to earn the trust. Why Veriff today is not offering global online like identity, like the key to every service, is that it takes time for us to actually build the trust, earn the trust, and we need to have the moral compass later on to do it, in the sense to show that actually we can help and we can create this transparency around it, that you can see where your identity has been used, and like creating this and ensuring that we can actually do it takes time. And this is kind of the similar to the governmental governments as well, because you can lose the trust in a matter of days or weeks.
Mm-hmm. Both my co-panelists have mentioned the moral compass, and this reminded me of two companies. One who had like the official motto, "Don't be evil." This motto has disappeared over time, and the company has been accused of occasionally being evil. Then there was a rather famous company having Estonian roots, revolutionizing communication between people, and being very proud of not having any technologies built in that allow the governments or other more or less authorized third parties to intercept. Then business realities occurred, and such technologies had been introduced. So this is a little bit the same set of questions. We have shifted away into the differences between how to run a country and how to run a business. But I would reel the discussion back to AI, and the question would be how we control the companies and how we control the AI. Once it becomes so big that it starts making its own decisions, do we really have the power to actually control these kind of companies or AIs?
So definitely, if we're looking at AI, yet again, going back to the slides a little bit, it's a tool, not the goal, but how we actually ensure that it stays that way is to actually working together. It's not, things start to go bad when regulators are in their corner regulating, when businesses are in the corner, and when actually the people are left alone and there's no communication between any of them. But I think the way to go forward, in the sense, is a good example how the CRAT law is kind of built, is actually combining all the stakeholders together into the same room and talking, discussing, and gathering the information to get the best outcome.
Yeah, responding on my side, I think definitely collaboration and bringing into the discussion about the ethics and moral and the bringing into the discussion all sides, that is NGOs, companies, researchers, and then the government as well, is important. The discussion about how to make sure that AI serves for the greater public good. My opinion is that banning a technology, I mean, we have quite a few movements, some of them are very, very loud and strong on kill the robot, the classical being the kill the robots movements. I believe that there is no good or evil AI or machines. There is no good or evil technology. There is not even a pure civilian or military technology for that matter, if we're talking very often, and very often there's the scary titles of how military killer robots are taking over. It is the use, how you put the technology into use. I mean, there are many examples of that, and even AI technologies in weapon systems can actually guarantee that, or there is something there. They can serve to save lives, to save the lives of soldiers. So collaboration is one thing which is important. I also think that, yes, we shouldn't ban blindly the whole movement, but make sure to put in measures so that we wouldn't discover ourselves in a situation that you described, that in one day there is an entity that is in control of a situation or of a sort of like dystopian system. We should be part of this process while things are developing.
There's a question on that from the audience. So can there be a meaningful choice for the opt-in if most people use the service, and can you opt out from some parts of the service and opt in for the vital part of the services? Can be both either government or business side. What's your...
Depends on a service, I guess. Opting in or out, it really depends. There are some where you cannot really opt out.
Well, even nowadays there are people, even in Estonia, who do not have a mobile phone or internet connection and who have chosen to live in the woods. Yes,
they have opted out of all the digital services.
And pretty much, but as is the case with Veriff, the identity or the Estonian ID card or any other kind. If you want to do anything online, you need to have some sort of identity. It all boils down to how large circle of people and companies and states trust that this identity is strong enough. So opting out indeed, it is possible for me to say that, okay, Janer, I don't want you to keep any data on me because of GDPR and right to be forgotten and yada, yada, yada. But then this would effectively mean that I would sign out from the services and that rely on the identity proof given by Janer. So yes, that's always it's always possible to go back into the woods.
Well, yes, but in Estonia, isn't it required by law to have for everybody to have an ID card? I mean, you cannot opt out to only have a paper passport in that sense. Like
True,
if you're born into the country, if you get registered, you get an online presence. So you can limit your yes, you can minimize your digital footprint. And surely, I mean, there should of course be the liberty of people who decide not to have smartphones and not to use social media, not to be there. But in Estonia, at least, it cannot be scrapped to zero, because once you're born, you get an
True.
ID number, and you do exist. You do get your support as a child.
Yeah, you would have to fake your own death, and then you would get deleted from the registers.
I think there are more exceptions into this a little bit, like from the banking sector as well. If you already become a customer of a bank, you need to hold at least some years, in the sense 5 years after that, you actually take away your papers and say, I want to leave this bank. So there's definitely like regulatory exceptions into this, that you can't opt out from everywhere.
About the law, there's a question, should there be a common EU approach to AI policy besides the GDPR, or should it be left to countries and companies to decide? Do you feel that there is a stronger regulation needed?
Well, I guess Vice Prime Minister Ansip would have been the best target for that question. The EU has already is already proceeding on this path of by commonly accepting the ethical guidelines. The question: how strong should a role should EU play in the regulation? I think it would be wrong to just focus on EU as a regulatory body. EU, when saying that we need a collaboration between various groups in this discussion on AI, I think EU plays an important role in bringing various sides together because at its best. Because at EU level, it has good tools and good gathering, convening power to bring in NGOs, companies, different governmental entities to finance projects that encourage study on innovation, and it is already doing that. So I think EU, we cannot avoid, or EU already plays a role. The question is where should it proceed with regulatory powers, and I think it's important to look at this innovation opportunities and regulation in pair. It depends how fast we proceed on this path.
Peter.
Speaking of the role of EU and as a regulatory body, it is impossible for any regulator to go out and say, "Thou shalt innovate," because this just is not going to happen that way.
I would comment on that. In the banking sector, it has sort of happened by the GDPR regulations. The banks are forced to open up the channels and give users more freedom.
Yeah, to do, but to come up with something fundamentally new in the purest sense of innovation, this you cannot mandate. However, as a regulatory body, EU has the means of breaking down the internal barriers, like the data localization, destroying the data localization rules, etc. EU has the possibility of bringing together different players and encouraging the cooperation between countries, union-level institutions, and companies. However, the regulation in general, when we speak of more regulation, then usually it boils down to more restrictions. And GDPR, while I say that the key tenet of GDPR, that there should be this security by default and by design in all information systems handling the personal data, that is true, that is so true, that should have been there a long time ago. But why GDPR is hard is for the whole legacy that does not have this built in by default and by design. Now, if we come to the AI policy and AI competition, we are not only speaking about the money that we have to throw in. We are not only speaking about the regulatory the breaking down of the existing barriers, but we do speak of trade secrets. The companies, anyone who has gained certain advantage wants to get their secret sauce secret. It's also not only between companies, but also between these very countries and groups of countries. China, US, they want to keep the edge on AI as they see it as their competitive edge. So that's why we can play as good as we want to. Ultimately, AI will be weaponized, and there will be fierce competition between these different parts of the world. And in this is the question how to balance our willingness to play nice and the harsh reality out there.
If I could add, when discussing the role of EU in regulation, I think it's important to maintain there are different measures. And when we all started, I mean, the very first remarks, there are different, the question of like the politicians starting to ask the right questions on different aspects of the AI, the transparency, awareness raising, access to data, and so on and so forth. The question is, it's important to maintain that these measures do require lots of money from the part of the companies, cost and effort to put them in. And the question is, while it's important to maintain them to develop safe and robust AIs, we need to carefully think before putting them into laws and consider softer alternative measures such as strategies, visions, and so on. Not everything should be cut into stone by a law or an EU directive, because they just can, yes, either stop innovation or be not counterproductive.
I can give a quick example maybe to paint a picture, in the sense that if we would take 100 pictures of a ship and like we take humans versus AI in the sense, then first starting off with the humans part is that we all have probably done this Google reCAPTCHA and understanding where is the ship, where is the bridge, where is the car in the sense. And how do we decide if it's actually a ship is because we all know what the ship looks like. But if we're talking about actually how AI would do it, like let's say 90-95%, they would decide that, hey, there's a sea, it's a ship then. So if we start to regulate something that we actually don't know how to operate, this should actually will gap our development as a union, as a country, as a business.
Still going back to the regulation, so to say, enforcing innovation, the Payment Services Directive, which gives users the right to export your bank transaction data and give a real-time access to your bank accounts to a third party. It would be nice, yeah. FinTech gets access to my bank accounts and I can do payment more easily, or Taxify takes, Bolt takes money out of my account without even owning a credit card, and so on. But on the other hand, if the license vendor is a strong player besides you, it could be a Google, Amazon, Facebook, even Chinese ones, if they get the license and user gives permission to them and to banking data and all your payment data in real time, this is pretty big amount of data, and which can go to a wrong hands or a bit out of the control. Whereas user is okay to click OK. I want to use this amazing service. The usability is so good. In Facebook now I can make payments to my friends from Messenger chat and so on. I give the access to. So it's an example of the regulation that forces innovation, but on the other hand, we cannot really stop other big techs to do whatever they like with our data. How do you feel about such opportunities and constraints? Is there something we should take into account when generating new law, and in this particular case as well?
Well, I think there are different layers, and the responsibility shouldn't be placed only on the EU for all the regulation. I mean, thinking of first at a personal level, there should be also, well, some awareness about whom do I choose, whom do I share my data with. In my previous position, I would think twice. I would still think twice when using a Yandex taxi, for example. Ultimately, and I should bear some responsibility when I click OK. Of course, it requires some awareness raising, the role of media and the role of overall digital literacy or overall cyber hygiene, but the personal responsibility shouldn't be underestimated. The second level is the national level, and there I'm thinking of the national decisions about the 5G, for example, where security and critical infrastructure decisions are involved. And there again, of course, it helps when different nations cooperate and share information, but ultimately, for currently at least, it boils down to the national level decision makers or how they see decisions being responsibility and decisions being laid up at the national level, and then there's the EU. So it depends on the different levels of of services and data, and it's ultimately the impact of this data sharing that has on our lives. Some are smaller decisions that should be down on the personal level, national security, and others at national level and then EU.
The awareness only isn't by like regulations or government, but it's where I see a little bit the businesses going as well is seeing how for example, Amazon has expanded and taking Facebook as an example, maybe one day they will provide online identity verification as well.
They basically do it already.
They basically bought one of our competitors, yes. But what's our edge into this is actually to bring awareness and actually say, can a company whose sole purpose is to make money on your data be trustworthy in the sense, or should it be an independent company whose sole goal is to verify your identity and actually stand by you?
Mm-hmm. And Peter, what's your thinking on giving users too much of liberty, on giving away their data?
Giving users too much liberty on giving away their data. If it's my data, then I can give it to whomever I want, and you can't give me liberty to deal with my data. You can only limit it.
But even with cookie consents, we don't...
This cookie consent...
Most of people don't read how much...
Please don't get me started. This cookie consent is one of the historical bad ideas by forcing anyone to change their password twice a day results not in better security, but in worse security, because people are not able to keep them, to memorize those passwords, and they end up taping them with Post-its onto their monitors. The same is with this cookie consent, which nobody, even the lawyers, even the GDPR fans, do not bloody read those nonsense notifications. And that's one thing. Speaking of what really would help is educating people, helping people understand how much they actually can do, how much their choices, what are the second order results of their choices. But sometimes, given the widespread consumerism and general laziness of people, I am not too optimistic in this educating the people scenario.
But let's take... You have an objection?
No.
Let's take a chance to educate some people with some personal stories. The latest story I heard from a cybersecurity expert was the example of people as the weakest link is the Fitbit or the other tracking devices. Where do you run? If you run in circles, oh, and let's zoom in, where do you run the circles? It appears that you're in military area. So it's very logically that you are potential target to getting into the data. So we could easily identify the people and where they are at any moment and so on. So we send the signals into the social media, essentially, even if we shouldn't really do it.
Well, I have very strong feelings about it. I think it boils down to we can't police being ignorant, but we can definitely encourage education and training.
Indeed.
I wouldn't underestimate the importance of that. I think doesn't matter how well placed we have the collective or organizational measures. At the end of the day, humans are the weakest link, and therefore we all bear some individual responsibility for cyber hygiene or digital literacy. And therefore, regardless of our age, our job, our level of positions, we all need to become better at cyber hygiene. And I think Estonia is doing a good job here, at least for the... Things can get better, but I think at least in the public sector, by having available the standard cyber hygiene test for all Estonian public officials, that's a good step. I personally think perhaps there should be a consideration of making it obligatory. Where I think things can get even better also in Estonia is targeting the children. I think just as we take very seriously the traffic education that starts at early age in kindergartens, we should also include in the educational requirements the basic cyber hygiene or internet safety at early age. Yes, we do have wonderful robotics class, we have for interested parties, but kids age 7, when they go to school and start to very often get their first smartphones and start surfing in the net all alone, should be aware of what are the dangers there, just as we teach them how to cross the street with a green traffic light.
To conclude with human errors, unless someone has a question from the audience to the microphone, before that I asked to share a story about you, or maybe your friend, when you made a mistake, giving too much of control into the AI or giving too much of control away to a machine over your data, and then how did you fix the mistake and what was the learning? And if it wasn't you, then you can say it was your friend.
I think a friend of mine, putting your identity document on a slide deck has a little bit background story that it actually got the tech branch. Luckily, it's now expired document, but still, it's a little bit on the contrary what we're fighting against, to have your identity document on a big slide with your biometrics, etc. Kind of mistake, kind of not.
Well, my story is not that much related with AI, but with basic internet safety, and it's two stories actually from Viljandi. One is a sad story back in 2008 when a teenager committed a suicide in Viljandi, and when an Estonian TV show started looking at it, it appeared that he had met a nice-looking Spanish lady on internet that who turned out to not be so nice and not be a lady. So how it is a reminder that no one knows you're a dog on the internet. That this meeting someone online can lead to very, very serious results. That internet criminal had actually had 43 targets in Estonia, and had actually there were and over 700 targets overall. So that's a very serious story of how vulnerable our children are online. Yet again, a few weeks later in Viljandi, there was the same TV show story, how another teenage guy built a flying machine by instructions he had downloaded from the internet. So it's the other side of the coin, that we shouldn't ban, we shouldn't take the smart devices away from our kids, but we should teach them, and it's the basic cyber hygiene where it all starts, and it leads the way all the way up to AI, but it's the basic steps of essential rules to apply when being online.
I would before giving it over to Peter, isn't it to a large degree that our attitudes and values are simply changing? Question from the audience. So current youngsters are told to be happy with giving away their data for services and so on.
Well, yes, they might, but they have to be aware of the dangers that are linked to that. I mean, I'm not saying that they shouldn't take the videos, 10-year-old girls shouldn't take videos at TikTok or Musical.ly, but it's the question of like how that they should be dressed and how much of background information is there about your home when they take these videos, and how many other family members appear, and then where did they post it, and they might be happy, but are their parents, and if there is someone vicious who tries to get to their parents or to their parents' employers through the kids, that's the question. So it's a question of conscious knowing what are the rules and again basic cyber hygiene.
At least some opportunity for political people to do some positive campaigns around your cyber hygiene. However, Peter.
Well, also happened to a friend. When you're participating in the training exercises in the Defense League, then it is sort of okay to make a selfie or two and post them online, but you really shouldn't do that during the exercise, because the background can give out information on where exactly you are located, which helps the other side who are also monitoring the network. And it's especially bad to make this selfie in front of your company's battle plan,
That's a good
which
idea.
also has happened. However, I also have another example, which is about how much you should really, every individual should think about these outsourced services and the companies and governments who are like your nannies and take good care of you. Microsoft had an ebook store, ebook service. So they run that for several years. And they decided, not good enough business for us, and decided to shut it down. So what they did, they paid back the money to all their subscribers, and then they effectively deleted remotely this content from the devices of their subscribers. So, but they paid back, so all should be like kosher and fine and nice. Is it really? So that's, again, we have, yes, it was perfectly legal. There's the copyright law, and there's the ebook is access to an ebook is a service. It's not a product like the regular thing. The world is changing, but you should think not just the changing technology, but also the changing laws, and keep in mind that how much control you give away to companies, governments, other people. You should at least think of what are the possible implications.
Great, and it's time to wrap up with a nice applause.